know that you can get pirated version of Word or Excel or whatever program you can think of. But that's not the same thing as people not still buying the full version.
The vast majority, right?
Yeah,
and that's where I think it's a little different on AutoHotkey. I think you mentioned this earlier. The vast majority of people are used to not paying for anything, and so when that's the norm, then ever spending some money is the different thing. It feels different, right? So you're a little more hesitant. And I know from talking to, and I know with me too, and with Maestriath, and I know from talking to Jackie some too, the average AutoHotkey, when an AutoHotkey person says, I'm willing to pay someone to help me with this, and I'm not insulting anyone on this call either, right? But more often than not, it's like, yeah, I'll give you $10, if you spend, 80 hours, and I'm making that up, right? But more often than not, they're not talking about real money. They're talking about a few bucks, and I get it, because to them it's a hobby, and they don't probably make a lot of money in the first place. So it's I do it for fun, and then I get a little bit of money. I make between 100 to 200, somewhere in there, a month. Well, 100, 150 a month on the Udemy course I did. It's a ballpark. It's not. Hey, I'll take it. Right. I'm happy with that. But that's why I'm doing the Udemy stuff, because I'm like, hey, you know what? At least I'll make some return on that. When I help people, when people write me, especially when they write me and say, like, I'm trying to click a button, I'm like, figure it out, right? But when they watch a video, and especially if they write me and they say they've tried for a couple hours and they want to pay me, and I'm like, I'm not doing that for money, right? I do it because I like helping people, and I like people learning how to do stuff, but I love it when they put in a little effort. But yeah, the whole getting paid to it, I saw someone asked more about tips on getting paid for it. We have a webinar where we talked about that, and we can definitely talk more of how to make money with AutoHotkey. It's there's several different approaches, right? One which we haven't discussed at all was, at least not really, was creating your own program and selling and distributing that program entirely encapsulated to a mass market, right? I think everyone's quote unquote dream is scaling it and being able to make a lot of money off it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really had maybe a year or two of, where I was like, but where to go with this? There's almost nothing that someone hasn't done already. If you spin that idea well enough, or promote your stuff enough, you can probably still make a small income on doing that. And it really depends on what your hopes and bounds for it is. But you can also figure out a thing that others haven't done very well, that others are really interested in paying for, and then do it.
Just as a caveat to that, the market for install this program on your Windows computer and run it is, shrinking. So that might not be the best area to look if someone is trying to make money. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's, shrinking as the web gets larger.
Well, overall, and actually that was another one of the podcasts we just covered, was our programs are they being run more remotely, and not locally, and is it being less easy to automate? Sure, like COM and things might be going away, but you can still automate them, right? And because of devices, like if you were meeting more with them using phones and tablets, that saw, especially for a while, it saw a pretty big uptake, but it's kind of flattened out as far as how much of it's going that way now, I think. Even then, the vast majority of work that's done on a computer is on a Windows computer around the world, right? And yeah, even if it is shrinking, it's what, 95% going to 94 or 93? I mean, it's a huge percent of, people use a Windows computer, right, to do their day-to-day work at a regular job. It's a big percent. I agree. It could be shrinking, but
yeah, and I'm not trying to argue the point. I think, if you got the right idea, definitely people are willing to step up and install your app or download your exe or whatever. But for the most part, it's like, oh, I want to get a movie converter, or I want to do X, Y, or Z with a file. Oh, just send it to this website and they'll send it back to you. Anyways, it's kind of a moot point. There's not a terrible amount of money to be made.
I do agree with you on that in one aspect, but again, as we talked about Blue Prism and UiPath, who are essentially AutoHotkeys running on remote desktops, which is again Windows, they're taking off like crazy on automating small things on Windows, which
and the amounts they're charging is insane. Yeah.
I mean, definitely. I think if I was to try and do it, you'd probably want to go for some kind of company that needs something done on a Windows computer, because your average, gamer or whoever that needs a $10 script to click a button,
right,
is you're gonna have to do quite a lot of those to get anywhere.
Right, but let's stick with that, because I think it's a good point, because it could convert to, well, yeah, but there's 8 million people that are playing that game, right? And so with the right volume, like there's so many different approaches to make money, right? Yeah, it's
and to go with that example, just as one thing is for Clash of Clans, the game, and in this case, it's an open source bot that has had more than 500,000 downloads, which in essence is, if you could figure out another thing that people were so willing to automate, being a game, being something else, being whatever, could be a spectator thing where you wanted to send hearts to someone on Twitch or whatever it might be, figuring something like that out, you could still get people to install your exit on a Windows computer because they were so willing to automate the task.
I think just for anyone listening, at that point it becomes kind of a marketing thing, because Joe probably speak to this more than I can, but at that point it's like, okay, you got this great script, how do you get it to those 8 million people?
Yeah. And Jackie and I, we've done a lot of stuff. My background's in market research, and then I have an undergrad in marketing, and I've read a load on direct marketing. And it's I could spend a lot more time pushing like links to my site and doing this and that and get more traffic. But I just let people that want to find my stuff find it. But if I was selling a thing, I could be out there doing ads on Udemy, about my Udemy course, and getting a lot more people to actually take it. Right? There are definitely things you can do. And hey, you know what? Every business, your number one most important thing is the marketing, right? It's how you explain it to the world and get people to do it and get people to buy it and differentiate yourself. It is by far the vast majority. It's you can have the best product in the world or the worst product in the world. The marketing is what really makes a difference in its success.
Yeah, I wasn't saying anything, I was reading, but I agree that marketing is a thing, and that's also one of the ways that I've managed to make money with AutoHotkey. It has been to find that niche, automate the task, and then market to tell people about having a tool to automate that task. Because without the marketing, I've seen time and time again that the amount of people leaving or being done with it or having automated the task enough, whatever it might be, to fall off more than people come in natively with just basic search or whatever. So to keep the income at a specific level or increasing, I'd also need to keep my marketing or my targeting up to date. Sure.
Nicholas, you've mentioned of hiring, even if it's not me, someone to do marketing. I think the biggest problem is they just don't have a clear direction of where to go. And it's one of the problems. A private business, generally speaking, especially at the beginning, has a CEO. He's the higher up guy, and then a clear pattern of who's in charge of what, and you have a direction of what your goals are. And when you're a nonprofit thing, and people don't get paid, you don't have that clarity of what we should be. You don't have uniform how do people vote, so, and who do you listen to? It's much more problematic.
Yeah, and I've seen on other forums with other things where they have like a donation thing and telling people what the site's expenses are and putting different types of budgets out so people can see what the money is used on, and by then having some kind of incentive for people to donate throughout the month for whatever reason to kind of help that thing either stay alive or grow. Whereas with AutoHotkey, it's like every other year or whatever it is, there is a small donation period, and they scramble to get maybe $300, $400, $500 in donations, and then they pay for the web server for 2-3 years and the domain, and that's it. And that makes sense for a nonprofit organization, but a nonprofit organization is still allowed to do marketing. It's still allowed to hire, let's say, a developer. It's still allowed to pay people. They can't have a profit when the year is over, but they can still generate income.
Oh, and they can waste money too. Let me tell you, I worked at a corporate nonprofit in the corporate headquarters for several years. In to me, the amount of waste I saw, I don't want to get into it, but it was just like it was disheartening for me. But yeah, it is interesting. Did anybody have anything they want to demonstrate? Some code they've worked on lately, or having trouble with anything? Just one more time before I'm enjoying this conversation. Don't get me wrong. It's just usually we'll have someone either ask a question on something or have something they want to share. Oh, a problem with Studio. What is the problem, Robert? And if you want to unmute and ask, it's great. Or
I could show you what I was working on today, but I'm scared of opening a huge can of worms.
Oh yeah.
Because I've been on this Zoom for an hour, and I don't want to. Maybe next time I can show you. Check it out.
Sure. What at a high level, what are you working on?
Well, I had a list of, and this kind of relates to our previous conversation. This is an app I wrote from my work, and I have this big long list of objects, and a couple objects were getting in there because they're looking at files that I didn't really want. And my old way to get rid of those would be to, go into a loop, and every time you see this, go ahead and pop it out of there or whatever. And I used a filter method this time, and it brought it down to 2 lines. And I was like, wow, this is a lot faster than writing a loop, which, is going to take, at least 10 lines or so.
That problem that I mentioned earlier where Maestruth was helping someone learn objects, my friend had written a very, very long thing that had, solved it, but it was hundreds and hundreds of lines long. And he's like, hey, how would you do this? And I said, I'd probably use an object. And he's like, well, can you help me? I'm like, well, I can, and I'm okay, but let me see if Maestruth's available because he's a wizard. And thankfully, Maestruth was available. So Maestruth joins the conversation, and he does some stuff, and in like 8 lines, I think, he did more than what my friend had done with hundreds of lines. And I mean, it was compact. I could follow it, right? It's one of those things I could follow. I couldn't write it from scratch in 5 minutes. Then he wrapped it all in the GUI and started showing us all the stuff, everything. It was intense. I mean, that's why I love watching him. But yeah, objects are insanely powerful. But you have to start understanding structure and how the data structured and nested. And that's where...
You guys got 10 minutes, I guess I could show it.
Sure.
I can show it to you next time if anyone's pressed for time.
Let me stop sharing if you're up for it. I saw Robert had a question with Studio, which we'll get him to maybe write it in here, and tool assisted speed run. I was looking at Mason, but go ahead and share your screen. Was that Sean, right? Yeah.
Oh, he can't get a breakpoint to work at all. I assume I'm doing something wrong. I'm not sure if you've done anything with breakpoints, Joe, in Studio.
It's been a while. It's been a
Yeah.
while.
Are you guys seeing what I'm showing up here?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so actually, if I Control Z, you probably see this is a long time ago. Whoops, went too far back there. This was marked to do for a long time. Okay, I guess I don't have it. But let me just show you here what I got going. So what this is doing is it's parsing a settings file, and in here I've got a blacklist, and I just want to remove this Sweden thing. And let me see, go back to the code. And now, so I've got this kind of God array, and inside this, it's just, you know, a huge list of like tracks or track name. Let's see what it's called. Let's just say Skive, which is the one that we don't want. And objects obviously look like this. They've got their different things. So I'll just give it a random date.
And Sean, I'm just curious. Do you have a background in programming?
Yeah, sorry. Let me turn that off for you guys.
What? No, you're fine. No, I was just curious. Have you programmed in other languages? What's your?
You know, I started with AutoHotkey, and I do a little bit of JavaScript because, you know, AutoHotkey kind of hard to build a whole career on. So this has a bit of JavaScript influence for sure, and we'll get to that here in a moment. But let me just fill this out as an example. But okay, let's just leave it right there for now. So as you know, this would be well, actually, this would be kind of a weird object because it's two things. So we'll say that's our object. And so I've just got like hundreds of these. In fact, I could probably show it to you. It looks kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is an exact, I think this is a AutoHotkey. Well, it's JSON, but it's basically a AutoHotkey object. Anyways, so I've got all these, and I've got some in here that I don't want. So we'll say this one up here we don't want, and the rest of these are called other stuff. So we want to remove this one, and my normal way to do that would be to, you know, loop however you want to loop. Either it's going to be like a loop like that, or if you're into the more modern loop, you do like a for whatever, like this. And my normal way to be go there, and then inside there you got a if the track name is equal to Skive, and obviously we're already hitting on what, you know, we would have to do a remove at or whatever, or I guess it would be key in this case. So we're already looking at, you know, this many here, and we've kind of got it manually set in the code of what to do. But what I did here today, obviously it's already done. I check if there's a blacklist in the settings, and we'll do a loop, you know, loop all of them. In here we've only got one. As you can see, this is the object. And what we do here is we do removable tracks, and we run it through this filter. Now, I apologize for what I'm about to do, which is kind of just shilling my library or whatever. But this library was kind of inspired by some of the things I started learning in JavaScript. What's it called? Filter. And what this method here does is it creates a function that performs a shallow comparison And returns true if a given object has a property value. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not the wrong thing, not the right thing. Okay, there it is. Iterates over elements of a collection and returns an array of elements that it predicates true for. So what that means is basically go through every single thing in this array, and we'll take that value, which is this, and yell at me if I'm going over time here. Basically, it'll put in, this. Let me get these spaces out of here. So it's basically substituting in here, and we would basically end up with a single array that looks like this, which would be our removable tracks. We then run that same array through a difference, and the difference is basically just a subtraction that you can subtract objects. And what we get out is that original array again, minus this thing that we didn't want. Anyways, that was just comparing it to the old way that I used to work, a lot faster than that. And I thought it was cool, but I understand it's not really the normal AutoHotkey way in some ways.
I'd say others have built that before. It's just a way of optimizing your for loop and the way of removing stuff from objects. So I get why you're stoked about it. Just because it's nice to really optimize the speed of something like that. So sure, and getting inspiration from how it's done in other languages, that's great. And
absolutely right. Often, especially if I'm in COM trying to do something, I switch over to VBA, searching for VBA solutions because it's so close to COM that it's very easy for me to adapt.
Yeah, and also seeing sometimes when at least Lacticos did some testing back and forth with running JavaScript from AutoHotkey and stuff like that, passing back and forth. And in some cases, then there can be some speed benefits because some of the code in JavaScript has been optimized as much as it has. Whereas in AutoHotkey, like sorting big arrays and stuff like that isn't something that anybody has used much time on. It's fairly simple, as you showed yourself. It's mostly just a for loop done in C++, which gives some speed, but if there is no real optimization of that code, then it will be slower than other languages where they're optimized for it.
Yeah, incidentally, when you started with the your loop object, I'm like, I almost never use that loop object anymore. Obviously, there's times where it makes sense or use it, but yeah, anytime I almost always use a for loop. I get it better. I don't know why, but it just, to me, it makes more sense. Obviously not. What is it called when it doesn't have the emulator? Is that what it's called? Not emulator.
Yeah.
What's the
enumerator?
Yeah, numerator. Yeah, that might be the right
numerator. Word. That's what it is,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, where it doesn't allow you to get the next one, kind of like the COM object, right? In the elements on a web page. It's a major bummer that's not there, but yeah. Okay, Robert had a question. Robert, you said you were ready to share, and I don't know if you saw my question, if you had updated.
I can share this real quick. Thank you.
Right. The first thing I would say is if you haven't updated Studio recently, make sure you update it. Just make sure it updates it fairly frequently.
Well, that's a good point, and I do need to check that. But this has been the case since I've been trying to. I've used the site. Is that how it's pronounced? I've used that editor for years, and I just, based on some of your videos, Joe, I actually found and started using Studio, and I thought, I really want to kind of dig in because it looks like this is the path that you're on.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, I can execute this guy in debug mode, and I can step into it, and that's all fine. Run it. But when you have a situation where you have a big loop that's doing a lot of things before you get to the part that you want to test, it's pretty brutal without a breakpoint. So I want to be able to just set a breakpoint right here. Now what I did is just click to the left of it, and I think that's all you do. Is that correct, or am I missing something?
It's been a really long time since I've done this, but I believe there's something to do with exactly where you click.
Yeah, it's just to the left of, it's to the right of the button and of the number, and to the left of the line. And it adds this comment here.
Yeah.
According to your video. But so, you know, I've got this comment now, and when I hit, I assume I can't run it. I need to be in debug mode, which makes sense. And then if this thing doesn't render properly unless you drag it a little bit. But then if I hit step into, I'm stepping, and if I hit run, it just burns right through the application, and I'm out.
Yeah, I just actually pinged Maestruth to see if he is around, because he obviously could speak to it far better than I can.
Is this a bug report for him? Maybe I just need to post it on the forum page for Studio?
If he doesn't respond in the next 30 seconds, unless anyone wants to try to figure it out, that's what I would say. Yeah, it's just.
Okay. Okay.
What version of AutoHotkey Studio is this?
Yeah.
Is it a newer version?
That's a good question.
I'd hit Alt M.
Oh.
Because even if it tells you, I'd have to look at mine, because I don't know what versions are what, right?
Gotcha.
CFU. Then I'll check for update, and so just go ahead and click it.
There is an update. If I update it, is it gonna? I guess it's gonna close all my.
It usually does a really good job of remembering everything for you. I usually don't even notice a difference. It downloads it, updates it. This is one of the things, by the way, I was going to have him build into the automate my tasks too, of like, hey, go check for an update.
Wow, that worked. That's pretty freaking slick.
Yeah.
All right. So Alt M CFU, just to make absolutely sure. And no new updates. All right. So we're absolutely on the current version. So I'm going to take this off. And I guess go back, and there's still a little red guy right there, though. That seems like that indicates.
That's just that something changed in that line. You haven't saved it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So you save it, that red line will go away. It turns into a green line and says, now, hey, this is where you've changed something.
All right. So now I've got presumably a breakpoint there. And
right.
If I go into debug and step into, that's working, hit run, first, second, third, yeah, same problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just say he hasn't replied. I just report it. I know he's developing an Android app at the moment. And just FYI, so he's developing an Android app that's going to run and store data in Firebase, and then we're going to use AutoHotkey to connect it with API calls and pull in data.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I would just go ahead and report that. And actually, if you want, I'm sure I can figure out your email address from the registrants. I'll write him and give him your email address and say you were the one that had the problem, unless you want to just go post it.
No, that's whatever you think would be best.
He'll he gets busy with stuff, so I'll just email it to him.
Well, I would appreciate that, because this thing's frustrating me.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one other question while I've got you real quick. This is my, and you'll probably recognize, well, now they're all in a different position. Somewhere here, I have, well, doesn't matter. I have your, one of your early, I don't see it. I have one of your early array documents, scripts up because I've been poring over it for days.
Yeah.
I'm working to build a example for myself that takes multiple, in this case, 5 wide, 1 tall, and build an array, a multidimensional array, where I then load the array with that data, and I am using a loop here, a loop and a for. And then I show various information about the array, and then I also have a function that pulls that data back out of the array and shows it in a message box. And so really this is all just about how to access this thing. Once I have this thing polished up, I wonder, because I have desperately looked for just a one-stop shop example of how to deal with a multidimensional array, and I can't find one. I've spent days looking, and so I'm thinking I'm going to post this to the forum for other people to see that are trying to figure out the same thing I'm trying to figure out, but I don't want it to come across as this is all the right way to do it. So how would you propose that I post this in a way to say, this is my attempt at documenting, multidimensional arrays. Can anybody else jump in and suggest where I could improve this?
Right.
I'd say you throw it in the ask for help.
Yeah.
Can anyone improve this?
Okay. And I've posted a couple of things there, and the people there have been very responsive and helpful. I also would really just rather switch this whole thing to objects, but as you were saying earlier, I'm so happy to hear that Maestra struggled with this early.
Well, early, exactly. And I think we all
cannot get my head around objects. I just can't. And so it seems like that's where I ought to be, but anyway.
Jackie, do you want to
be 100% fair? Objects were a pretty late addition to AutoHotkey. Prior, there, you had variables, and that was about it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing that Lecturecoast really did for AutoHotkey. Whatever he did on the back end, I don't know, but the addition of objects was probably what moved AutoHotkey into something truly useful in these recent years, or whatever you might say, because before then it's more like Bash might be a way of putting it. I don't know for sure.
I'd love to take this, by the time I'm done with this example, it's going to be my best effort at a clear everything you could want to know about multidimensional arrays. I'd like to essentially implement the same features with objects, and then have those 2 examples that people could, look at. I mean, it would have helped me so much if I had been able to find that myself.
Multidimensional objects or multidimensional arrays are just arrays of objects, is how I think of it. Yeah, because everything that's not a variable is an object in AutoHotkey.
Yeah, and it says that that arrays are objects, and I come from a .NET world, and so C#, and so the concept of classes with properties, and that's really where I want to be. But I cannot work out how to build a collection of objects here. Short of, I actually learned some things from your email, from your sharing earlier a little bit, Sean, as you were showing exactly that. You made an array with a series of objects in it, so that actually helped me. So anyway, I don't want to hog the time here, but.
Yeah, nesting them is it. I've done several things with Maestriath where I'll have a question, I'll be doing something, he'll nest it, and then I'll get it after a while. But there is, even in the objects alone, there I remember there's a one example in the AutoHotkey help on a nested array, a multidimensional array that I worked through at one point.
It seems like what it does is they're all about constructing them, and they pretty much are defining the arrays statically, as in they're loading them, in the code. They're not taking data like, what this thing is doing here. It's, it's taking data from somewhere else and putting it in programmatically. Most of the array examples I've been able to find are, here's an array, value, comma, value, comma, value.
Yeah. Since it was, added over time, you were probably fighting an uphill battle just to, find an example that makes sense to you. And the problem you're going to have is most of the examples that you find searching in Google are on the older side. So a real modern example is hard to come by.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what I was going to say, what would be great, I think, if you do, especially even if someone right now was to start working on this, or if you or someone, let's say someone points you to a different one and you work through it and makes sense, you will learn far more by having someone, especially if we can get them to do it live, adapt this one to an object like an actual real nested object version, because it's your code and you understand it thoroughly, right? When I try to learn someone else's thing and I'm looking at their example, I kind of get it, but man, when I know this, which you've already done really well, and I see how they change it, suddenly that's where I have my aha moments.
I'm sure you're right about that. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I'd pay somebody for their time to do that. You were talking about earlier about making, ways to make money with AutoHotkey. There are people out there that would pay for that kind of thing.
Right.
And I was kind of getting to that when you were asking about having a subscription service. I'd pay something a month or a year to be in the group for something like that. And then, but a serious value add for that group would be access to resources that could just schedule an hour a time with you for, whatever that hourly rate would be. I'd be all over that. And I would assume other people would too.
I just put an example. It's a big example, but I have a nested object example in my templates of stuff, right? That I use a for object where I nest objects underneath the first object.
Okay.
That's my go-to example that I use when I want to nest an object within other stuff. It's not a perfect example, but just so FYI, it's what I use.
Okay. Great. Well, I said you, Joe, I meant, honestly, I'm talking to the group here. I mean, yeah. If anybody is, and you'd obviously be a good person to set up something like this, but you're obviously, spend a lot of time with this thing, but I can imagine a group of AutoHotkey professionals, if you will, making themselves available, sort of a freelancer or, Odesk, I think Upwork now, that sort of concept where, if you want to do AutoHotkey stuff, you can go here and one of these people would be happy to, take your money to help you do it. So that might be a way.
Well, now again, Jackie, do you want to try to adapt this thing live? I mean, you can do this stuff. I would, I get under pressure and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do this live with a group of people. But Jackie, do you want to give it a whirl?
First, I wanted to say that you already have stuff like Discord if you just want live help.
Yeah, I see that Jay Mason just said he's on Discord. I didn't even know that there was a hotkey.
Yeah, the Discord would love this because they get too many easy questions, and this is, at least moderate.
Yeah, and as you said yourself, there has been a recent complaint about the Discord being a little bit hard on people who expect their answer to be, or their question to be answered, because most of the people,
you have to make a good post and, show, like Joe was saying, you have to show that you've made an effort and you have to give them the information they need. I hate it when, how many times you see a post that says, well, if you'd share your source code with us, we might be able to help you. I mean,
I made an infographic at one point years back where I actually took all of the posts from one of our gaming subforums and tried to make a lot of data out of that. And one of the interesting parts was that if people had shared their code in the first post, they got a complete answer within the same day. In something with 78% of the cases or something like that. It was just amazing what it actually did that people posted their code. So yeah.
The other one is to have a female, icon of yourself. So, pretend you're a girl and you get a lot more support.
Apparently that works as well. Yeah.
But Jack, did you Did you want to at all try to work on this, or like you said, parts of it are already?
I'm not sure.
Well, I can give it a whirl, but what's the problem? I don't see the problem.
Yeah,
well, it's working
that's
now.
what I got at.
My big thing, I like I said, at 3 a.m. last night, I got it wrapped up. But I want to add some more, examples of these are the different methods you can call. I'm working out. It seems like max array and length they're giving me the same results, and I understand.
You should probably be using count. See, a big difference with max index is it assumes that all your keys are numbers, and it'll give you the biggest number. But if you have anything missing in that, so let's say you have an array of 5 things, but through whatever happened, you took out number 3 and number 2. It'll still say 5.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Sean, because I actually was aware of that problem. I didn't know how to solve it, though. So yeah, I will, matter of fact, I think right here I said indexes must be contiguous because I was using links. You're saying if I use count instead.
Count will give you the exact number that are in there currently.
Okay.
And they can be, a lot of times in AutoHotkey, the keys are numbers, but sometimes they're not. And count will give you an accurate number no matter what they are.
Okay. Well, that was tremendously helpful right there.
Again, the reason why you're seeing all of these, max index, length, count, is because it's been added over time.
Yeah.
At the beginning, the only thing you actually had was max index. And then a lot of people were kind of finding inconsistencies with just what Sean explained. And then length was added. And most recently, count has been added. And what the inner workings behind length and count is, I'm not sure if there's really any difference, but people just like the different word.
Okay. Well, that's actually one of the things that I struggle with. And I think as a person trying to learn AutoHotkey, and I mentioned this earlier in the chat, the tool is so mature, you just start Googling and you get, an answer from 12 years ago and an answer from 3 days ago. And, it's hard for somebody to know which, what's the current thing, what's the current best practice. I spent a week fiddling around with AutoHotkey version 2 before I realized that it's maybe not really ready for prime time yet. And I'd already written a bunch of examples for myself and I was, headlong into it. And then I went, wait a minute.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably not that bad of a thing to go with AutoHotkey version 2, but yes, it has slowly moved far away from version 1, where in the beginning it was just version 1 with the slap-on version 2 label. But slowly it has been moving away from version 1, and therefore it's not really comparable
I'm looking
anymore.
here at how length works.
Yeah.
I am having a hard time thinking of a situation where you'd want to use that. Count is really the best answer right now for most, array working.
Okay.
Length, if you have a key of 10 in there, it's going to give you that, even if it's the only item. It's almost like max index.
Yeah, again, length was put in after max index and before count.
Count, I was looking at it, was added in May of 2018. So it's
it's really new. I only started using it in like 2019.
But yeah, stuff like this is the documentation is the most secure place to go to know what's most up to date. Right. But one of the methods that I use is I go to AutoHotkey's webpage, the front page, and then in the menu, select search.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going into the forum, instead of just using plain old Google, going into search on the homepage, you will use AutoHotkey's custom search. So it's still a Google search, but it's customized by the AutoHotkey people. So it will only search AutoHotkey related sites, which will of course limit what hits you get. But you can control which of the forums you want to get return hits from. And you also have the access to the relevance and the date sorting. So you can actually sort your search from the new forum by date.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So
that is fantastic. I thank you so much for that information, Jackie. I had no idea. I've actually used that search accidentally a couple of times, but I haven't really noticed what you're talking about as far as the date filtering and that sort of thing. And so yeah, I'll go check that out. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, at least to get the newest possible information.
Well, I don't want to hold everybody up here. This is my first time at the webinar. And so I've watched a bunch of Joe's videos over time, but this is the first time at the webinar, and I really appreciate everybody's been so helpful. And I've gotten a number of people responding, Mason and Angel, in the chat as well. So I thank you all for the information.
Well, that's why we do the webinars, right? It's you can, to me, and I used to do it with Jackie. Jackie gets really busy, so I talk more to Mason now. It's not because I choose one over the other, but I was learning so much more when I went years and years, first off, without even posting to the forum, just reading, right? And then because I was scared to post something to the forum, and then I realized, okay, if I, make sure I explain myself well and stuff, it's not that scary. But what I realized when I started working with Jackie and I could talk and dynamically share a screen, I learned so much better than trying to read someone else's stuff. And so years ago, Jackie and I decided let's start doing webinars and teaching something and then fielding questions live. It's very different.
Well, it's been a terrific experience today. So I really appreciate you guys.
Cool. Anyone else have anything? I think we're
on the time, right, Joe? So
yeah, right. Probably. That's what I was just thinking. I know for especially Jackie, it's really late for him. Well, thank you all. Unless you have some other, and you can email me. I will either later tonight or tomorrow morning. Upload all the recordings, email them out to everybody who was registered, who's on this call. So you'll get a recording of it. I'll see if Maestrith, he hasn't replied yet still, but I'll Robert, that was you, right? That had the question on the debug.
Oh, yes, I'd already muted myself.
Okay. So I'll try to remember to make a note to myself to follow up with you on the breakpoint. Right? Yeah. So awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.